Hello, my name is Eric Ford. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about corporate level strategy. As you can see, this is subtitled Creating Value Through Diversification, and it has 6 parts. This is part 1. At the end of each segment, the video will end and you will have to click on a new link or video feed in order to watch the next part. I appreciate your patience. The learning objectives for this section are you should have an understanding of why companies diversify and how they go about it. In particular, we'll talk about the reasons for failure of many diversification efforts, how managers attempt to create value through these initiatives, how corporations often will engage in what we call related diversification in order to achieve synergistic benefits through economies of scope and market power. This comes out of the field of industrial organizational economics and often talks about where the appropriate boundaries of a corporation should be. We'll talk about unrelated diversification and how that people use different mechanisms to try and obtain benefits from this, in particular restructuring, parenting, and portfolio analysis. With regard to the latter, portfolio analysis, you may have heard of a gentleman named Warren Buffett. He's probably the most famous portfolio manager in the United States, and his company, Berkshire Hathaway, is exceptional at this task. We'll also talk about the means of engaging in diversification, mergers and acquisitions. We won't talk about divestiture, which is actually the third part of this, although I'll make some passing references to some fairly famous divestments. And collectively, mergers, acquisitions, and divestiture are referred to as MAD in the literature. And for some jokes, I'll leave it to you to find out what those are. We'll talk about joint ventures and strategic alliances and internal development. And lastly, we'll talk about managerial behaviors that can erode the creation of value through these. Think about getting the culture of different companies or even similar companies to mesh together. I'd like to start this lecture off with an example of a company that did a great deal of integration, both vertical and horizontal, over the course of its existence, and this is Kaiser. It was started by a gentleman named Henry J. Kaiser. And if you've ever been to Las Vegas, he's one of the 2 people you really ought to thank. He was the chairman of the board of the organization that oversaw the building of Hoover Dam, which provides all the electricity for the lights in Las Vegas. The other person you probably ought to thank is a gangster named Mo Green. And if you watch the Godfather series, he's the man at the end of episode 2 that gets shot in the eye, and that's actually a fairly accurate depiction. The other dam I have on here is a dam called the Grand Coulee Dam, and this was in the Pacific Northwest, and this actually led the building of this dam to Kaiser investing in aluminum and steel. These dams were hydroelectric dams, and aluminum requires a lot of electricity in order to be manufactured. And having the Grand Coulee Dam provide that electricity fairly inexpensively created a natural market for him, and he went into aluminum and steel. As part of that aluminum and steel, he suddenly had the materials to engage in shipbuilding, and when World War II came along, there was a great need for what were called transport ships, but we refer to them as Liberty ships. I've actually got a picture of one on the slide here. These were manufactured in Richmond, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Kaiser was quite famous for this. However, when he built these, they also encountered a problem. Several of these ships were lost at sea, and they were essentially breaking in the middle. And this was the result of a new innovation that Kaiser introduced. Instead of using rivets, they used seaming to manufacture the ships, and these seams would become brittle in the cold water and crack. And it was really quite a catastrophe at the time, and it set the man back both personally and in the public eye a great deal. So that was it. Uh, the shipbuilding was also integral to the thing I'm going to talk to you at some great length about, which is something called Kaiser Permanente Health System. He started Kaiser Permanente, or a health system, for his employees. Why did he do this? Well, shipyards, electrical plants, things like dams tend to have large populations living in one place, often under the control of one person or one organization, and that company will often go ahead and deliver everything that those people need. These are similar to mill towns. So if any of you live in a mill town, you might be able to drive down a street and see many houses that look the same, and you'll see schools and hospitals that bear the name of the people who owned the mills. You might think about where you live and if there's such a hospital in your town that was started as part of a company firm. And he also has one of my favorite quotes: "Problems are only opportunities in work clothes." Just a quick example of how mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures go and how frequently they occur. I don't think people appreciate just how much of this goes on in the marketplace. In about 1945, after the war, Kaiser became interested in automobiles and started to build his own cars. And then he bought a company called Willys Overland Jeeps. And Willys were the people who designed the ubiquitous Jeep that you see in every World War II or Korean War movie. And you can see how it appears on this photo. And the Jeep brand was created. He eventually sold the Jeep brand, divested, to American Motor Company, AMC. AMC was later bought by Chrysler. Chrysler was later bought by Fiat. And for those of you, and this should be in most everybody's recent memory, Chrysler was actually a failed auto company. The United States government came in and provided bridge financing in order that Fiat, an Italian company, could actually go ahead and purchase Chrysler, although they don't own it outright just yet. So that ends part one, and that's a brief introduction, and we'll talk a little more in depth about Kaiser Permanente and how it is an integrated company in just a moment.